The day was bright and warm, with the soft sunlight filtering through the large windows of the community center. People of all ages had gathered in the small auditorium, a mix of curiosity and excitement in the air. Some had come for the event itself, while others were simply passing time, curious to see what the fuss was about. The announcement had promised a lecture by a Harvard professor, a man whose reputation in academia was known far and wide. His work was respected, and his intelligence admired by many. Yet, he had a way of making people feel small, as if knowledge itself belonged only to a select few. Dr. Jonathan Whittaker walked into the room with a confident stride, his polished shoes clicking against the polished floor. He was a man in his early 50s, with neatly combed hair streaked with gray, sharp eyes that seemed to measure everything in an instant, and a presence that demanded attention. Even before he began speaking, the room quieted, as if his reputation alone had silenced the audience. He was dressed in a dark suit, and a crisp tie completed his look of meticulous professionalism. He carried himself with the pride of a man who had spent decades proving himself to the world, and who believed that he had little to learn from anyone else. As he approached the podium, he glanced over the audience with a practiced, almost calculating look. His eyes scanned faces quickly, lingering for just a moment on each person, assessing, judging, measuring their potential. There was a part of him that enjoyed this, the quiet power of being seen as smarter, faster, better. He knew he could charm the audience, answer their questions with ease, and subtly show them how much he knew. Some might call it arrogance, but in his mind, it was confidence earned through years of study, research, and recognition. Among the audience sat Eleanor Thompson, an elderly woman with soft gray hair neatly tied in a bun. She wore a simple blouse and skirt, unassuming and modest. Her eyes were bright, and she held herself with a quiet dignity, but she made no effort to draw attention. She was not dressed to impress, and her presence might have been easily overlooked by someone like Dr. Whittaker, who relied heavily on first impressions and appearances. Eleanor had been attending lectures at the center for years, always curious, always learning, always quietly absorbing the knowledge offered by others. She had a love for learning that had never faded, even as life had presented challenges and responsibilities that pulled her attention away from formal education. Dr. Whittaker began his lecture, speaking about the latest trends in science and technology. His voice was clear and commanding, his words precise and often complex. He had a way of speaking that made ordinary concepts sound important, and difficult concepts seem simple at least, to those who could follow him. Most of the audience listened politely, nodding along when they could, feeling both intrigued and slightly intimidated by the professor's knowledge. He was, after all, a Harvard professor, a man who had devoted his life to understanding the world in ways few others could. Then, near the middle of the lecture, Dr. Whittaker noticed Eleanor raising her hand. A small smile crept onto his face, though it was subtle, almost imperceptible. He had seen this many times before. Someone would raise a hand, ask a question, and he would answer it in such a way that the person would feel slightly embarrassed, and the audience would be reminded of his superior knowledge. He expected Eleanor's question to be simple, perhaps even naive. It was the perfect opportunity to subtly show everyone who truly understood the subject. He nodded at her to speak. Eleanor introduced herself calmly, her voice soft but clear. She mentioned that she had recently retired but had always been fascinated by the subjects he was discussing. Her tone was respectful, her demeanor polite. She spoke as someone who was genuinely curious, not someone trying to challenge or show off. Dr. Whittaker's mind was already forming his response. He would answer her question with precision, perhaps even a touch of condescension, and then move on. He had done it many times before, and it always worked. When he asked her the question, he had prepared a tricky, advanced question about recent developments in quantum computing. He expected her to falter. Most people, he thought, would be intimidated, confused, or unable to respond at all. It was the kind of question that separated the knowledgeable from the curious, the experts from the learners. Dr. Whittaker leaned slightly forward, waiting for her to respond, a hint of a smug smile on his face. The audience watched, some leaning forward in anticipation, unaware of the small drama unfolding. Eleanor paused, just for a moment, her eyes focused as if she were gathering her thoughts carefully. Then, she began to speak. Her voice was steady and confident, her words chosen with care. She described the topic with clarity, using terms that were precise yet accessible. She referenced recent research, named key scientists in the field, and even explained concepts that were considered complex by most. Her knowledge was deep, her understanding evident, and her ability to communicate it in simple terms was remarkable. The room was quiet, every eye on her. The murmurs that had begun when she first spoke were replaced with awe. The audience realized that Eleanor was not just informed, she was brilliant. She had not come to the lecture as a passive listener, she had come as someone who understood the subject intimately. Dr. Whittaker, who had expected an easy victory, felt a strange and unfamiliar sensation, doubt. His carefully constructed confidence wavered as he listened. Eleanor's explanation was accurate, detailed, and insightful. She spoke with authority, yet with humility, never belittling anyone, never flaunting her knowledge. For a moment, Dr. Whittaker struggled to maintain his composure. He had always prided himself on his ability to control the room, to demonstrate knowledge with ease, and to leave an impression of superiority. But Eleanor, with her calm presence and brilliant mind, had turned the tables. The audience, sensing the shift in dynamics, responded with nods of admiration, some whispering to neighbors about her intelligence and clarity. The professor's carefully rehearsed lines and clever retorts seemed suddenly unnecessary, even inappropriate. Eleanor continued, explaining complex ideas in a way that was understandable yet intellectually rigorous. She made analogies, connected theories to real-world examples, and demonstrated an understanding of both the history and future implications of the subject. Every word she spoke reflected a lifetime of learning, curiosity, and experience. Dr. Whittaker found himself listening intently, captivated despite himself, unable to interrupt without appearing rude. The moment that was meant to embarrass her had completely backfired. When she finished, the room erupted into polite but enthusiastic applause. Some of the younger attendees, who had been intimidated by Dr. Whittaker's presence, looked at Eleanor with admiration, inspired by her knowledge and poise. The professor, for his part, felt a mixture of embarrassment and respect. He had underestimated her completely, relying on assumptions based solely on her age and appearance. That mistake, he realized, was both humbling and enlightening. After the applause, Dr. Whittaker thanked Eleanor for her question and her explanation, though the words felt strained and insufficient. Inside, he was grappling with a mix of emotions, surprise, embarrassment, and the beginnings of admiration. Eleanor had not sought to humiliate him or prove herself, she had simply shared her knowledge, as she had done countless times before, always quietly, always with grace. The audience had witnessed something rare, a true moment of intellectual brilliance, unbound by ego, uncolored by appearance, and unassumingly powerful. As the lecture continued, Dr. Whittaker's confidence remained shaken. He spoke carefully, choosing his words with more thought than usual, aware now that assumptions could be dangerously misleading. Eleanor, meanwhile, listened with gentle curiosity, occasionally nodding as she followed the discussion. Her presence brought a quiet dignity to the room, a reminder that true knowledge is not always loud or visible. By the time the lecture concluded, it was clear to everyone that the encounter with Eleanor had changed the dynamics of the event. She had challenged not only the professor's assumptions but also the audience's expectations of what it means to be intelligent and learned. Dr. Whittaker left the podium with a subtle but profound realization: brilliance can exist quietly, often unnoticed, and it deserves recognition, not judgment. As people filed out of the auditorium, many lingered to speak with Eleanor, asking her questions and expressing admiration. Dr. Whittaker watched from the side, a mix of humility and curiosity stirring within him. For the first time in years, he had met someone who challenged him not through confrontation or ego, but through knowledge, calmness, and grace. That encounter, he realized, would not be forgotten easily. And so, the first chapter of this remarkable story ended not with humiliation or conflict, but with an unexpected lesson. In a quiet room in a small community center, an elderly woman had reminded everyone present that intelligence is not measured by appearance, age, or status. It is measured by understanding, clarity, and the ability to inspire others without seeking praise. Dr. Whitaker, for all his accolades and fame, had learned that lesson in a way he would never forget. The room was buzzing quietly after the lecture, filled with the murmurs of people discussing what they had just witnessed. Some were students who had come to hear the Harvard professor speak, while others were local community members who rarely had the chance to meet someone of his status. Everyone seemed to be talking about one thing: Eleanor Thompson, the elderly woman who had spoken with such clarity and depth. Dr. Jonathan Whitaker, for his part, felt a strange mix of emotions he could not easily name. He was embarrassed, yes, but also deeply intrigued. He had expected an easy moment, a chance to display his knowledge and leave the audience in awe. Instead, he had been humbled by a woman who, by appearances alone, he would have dismissed. Now, curiosity gnawed at him. Who was this woman? How had she come to know so much about a subject that even some of his graduate students struggled to understand? After the audience began to filter out of the small auditorium, Dr. Whitaker approached Eleanor. His steps were careful, measured. He did not want to appear rude, yet he could not suppress his need to learn more about her. Eleanor was gathering her notes quietly, still calm, still composed, her expression serene as if nothing extraordinary had happened. To the casual observer, she might have seemed like any other attendee, polite and humble. But Dr. Whitaker knew better now. "Excuse me, Mrs. Thompson," he asked, his voice polite, though slightly hesitant. Eleanor looked up at him and smiled gently. "Yes," she replied, her voice soft but confident. "I have to admit, your explanation earlier about quantum computing, it was remarkable," he said carefully, choosing his words. "You clearly know far more than I expected. I'd like to know, how did you come to study this? Were you in academia?" Eleanor's eyes twinkled slightly. "I suppose you could say that," she replied, her tone modest. "I studied physics a long time ago. I worked in research for many years, though I stepped away from formal work decades ago. Life had other plans for me, but I never stopped learning." Dr. Whitaker felt a jolt of surprise. He had expected perhaps a hobbyist or a self-taught enthusiast. Instead, he had discovered a lifetime of experience and formal study. "You worked in research?" he asked, leaning in slightly. "May I ask where? What kind of work?" Eleanor nodded and began to speak, her words deliberate and precise. "I was part of a research team that focused on theoretical physics and quantum mechanics. We collaborated with colleagues across the world, studied phenomena that were difficult to observe, and contributed to work that helped shape the technology you see today." She paused for a moment, then continued, "I chose to step away from full-time work to focus on my family and personal life, but I have always followed developments in science closely. I've read papers, attended lectures, and kept my curiosity alive. That is why I could answer your question today." Dr. Whitaker felt a mixture of awe and humility. He had underestimated her completely. Her quiet demeanor, her age, and her modest clothing had led him to assume she was someone ordinary, perhaps even slightly naive. He realized now how wrong he had been. Eleanor was extraordinary, her brilliance hidden beneath a calm exterior that few would recognize. The professor and Eleanor continued speaking, moving to a quieter corner of the room. He asked more questions, genuinely curious, and she answered each one with ease and insight. She referenced studies and experiments, named scientists whose work he respected, and even offered perspectives that he had not considered himself. Dr. Whitaker found himself taking notes, not to prove a point, but to understand her perspective and learn from it. As they talked, Dr. Whittaker noticed something else: Eleanor's ability to communicate complex ideas in simple, clear language. She did not use her knowledge to impress or intimidate. Instead, she explained concepts in ways that anyone, regardless of their background, could grasp. It was a rare skill, one that he, despite decades of teaching, had sometimes struggled to master. The realization humbled him further. She was not only brilliant, she was wise, patient, and kind. The audience, meanwhile, continued to react to Eleanor's brilliance. Some approached her to ask questions, eager to learn more. Young students who had been intimidated by Dr. Whittaker's lecture now looked to Eleanor for guidance. Parents and older attendees spoke in quiet admiration, marveling at her ability to simplify difficult topics without losing their depth. Her presence had transformed the event from a typical lecture into an unforgettable experience. Dr. Whittaker watched as Eleanor interacted with the attendees, offering explanations, answering questions, and listening with genuine interest. He noticed how the audience responded to her warmth and clarity, how her words inspired curiosity and confidence. He realized that intelligence was not about showing off knowledge, it was about sharing it in a way that empowered others. Eleanor embodied that truth effortlessly. As the afternoon went on, Dr. Whittaker reflected on his own behavior. He had gone into this lecture with an assumption that knowledge belonged to those in positions of authority, that age or retirement meant a person was no longer relevant. Eleanor had shattered that assumption. He felt a pang of guilt for having judged her before understanding her. But alongside that guilt was a newfound respect and admiration. He realized that meeting Eleanor was not just a moment of embarrassment, it was a rare opportunity for learning, a chance to broaden his own understanding of intellect, humility, and human potential. Eleanor, for her part, remained unbothered by the professor's presence or reputation. She treated him as an equal, not with arrogance, not with condescension, but with respect. Her confidence was quiet, her brilliance natural. She did not need validation from anyone, yet she inspired it in others simply by being herself. Dr. Whittaker began to see that true genius often resides in those who do not seek attention, who do not crave recognition, and who allow their work and knowledge to speak for itself. At one point, a young student approached Eleanor with a notebook, asking if she could explain a concept that had been mentioned during the lecture. Eleanor smiled warmly and spent several minutes patiently guiding the student through the idea, breaking it down step by step, using examples and analogies that made the concept accessible. Dr. Whittaker observed quietly, realizing that her impact extended far beyond a single question or lecture. She was teaching, inspiring, and nurturing minds in ways that formal academia often struggled to achieve. The professor felt a shift within himself. He understood now that true learning was not about proving superiority or winning arguments, it was about curiosity, openness, and a willingness to see value in others. Eleanor's quiet brilliance had reminded him of this fundamental truth. The encounter was changing the way he viewed intellect, teaching, and human connection. As the day drew to a close, Dr. Whittaker thanked Eleanor again, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He realized that he had been given a gift, the chance to meet someone whose mind was sharp, whose heart was kind, and whose presence was transformative. Eleanor, in turn, smiled and offered gentle words of encouragement, reminding him that learning is a lifelong journey, and that wisdom often comes from unexpected places. When the attendees began leaving, many paused to speak to Eleanor, to ask questions, and to express their admiration. The young, the old, the curious, and the eager all found inspiration in her words. Dr. Whittaker stayed behind, quietly observing, feeling a mix of humility, reflection, and newfound respect. He had come to the lecture expecting to demonstrate knowledge, yet he left with a profound lesson about assumptions, respect, and the quiet power of true intellect. By the time the last people had departed, Eleanor gathered her belongings, her calm demeanor unchanged by the attention she had received. She had not sought recognition, yet it had found her. She had not sought to challenge anyone, yet she had transformed the perspectives of all who had listened. Dr. Whittaker, watching her, knew that this day would remain in his memory forever. It was not merely an encounter, it was a turning point, a moment of awakening that reminded him of the value of humility, the danger of assumptions, and the limitless potential of a mind that never stops learning. As they left the community center together, Dr. Whitaker spoke softly. "Mrs. Thompson, I think I have much to learn from you," he said, his tone sincere. Eleanor smiled, her eyes reflecting both warmth and wisdom. "We all have something to learn, Dr. Whitaker. That is the beauty of knowledge, it is never finished, and it is never limited to one person or one place." In that quiet exchange, a bridge had formed between generations, between formal authority and lived experience, between assumption and understanding. Dr. Whitaker realized that the world was far richer than he had sometimes imagined, and that brilliance could reside in the most unexpected of places. He felt a deep sense of humility, mixed with excitement, knowing that this was only the beginning of an extraordinary journey of learning and mutual respect. And so, the day ended not with embarrassment, but with revelation. Not with competition, but with connection. The lecture, which had begun as an event to showcase expertise, had transformed into a lesson about curiosity, respect, and the limitless possibilities that arise when assumptions are set aside. Dr. Whitaker, once so certain of his own authority, now carried a new understanding. Intelligence is not defined by position or appearance, but by the courage to explore, to teach, and to inspire, no matter one's age or station in life. The days following the lecture were filled with unexpected attention for Eleanor Thompson. Word of her brilliance had spread through the local community, and soon, people from neighboring towns began to call, curious to meet the woman who had impressed even a Harvard professor. Newspapers wanted to write articles, and a few local television stations asked for interviews. Eleanor, ever humble, agreed to a few interviews, but she never allowed the attention to overshadow her purpose, to share knowledge and encourage curiosity. Dr. Jonathan Whitaker, meanwhile, could not stop thinking about Eleanor. Her calm confidence and extraordinary mind had left a lasting impression on him. He had always believed that he knew the best methods to teach and to explain complex ideas. Yet, in Eleanor, he saw a natural ability that transcended formal teaching. She had an innate skill to make difficult concepts understandable, engaging, and even exciting. For someone who had spent decades in academia, this was both humbling and inspiring. He decided to visit Eleanor at her home one afternoon. When he arrived, she greeted him warmly, offering tea and a quiet space to talk. Her home was modest but filled with books and notes, a clear reflection of a life dedicated to learning. On the walls hung framed photographs of scientific conferences, family gatherings, and landscapes she had visited over the years. Everything in the room spoke of a life lived with purpose, curiosity, and balance. "Dr. Whitaker, it's nice to see you again," Eleanor said, pouring tea into delicate cups. "I hope the lecture did not trouble you too much." He chuckled, shaking his head. "On the contrary, Mrs. Thompson. It reminded me that there is so much more to teaching, learning, and understanding than I ever imagined. You have a rare gift, and I would like to understand it better. How did you develop it?" Eleanor sipped her tea thoughtfully. "It was never about developing a gift," she said softly. "It was about nurturing curiosity, following it wherever it led, and never being afraid to ask questions. When I was young, I loved to read everything I could get my hands on: physics, mathematics, philosophy, even literature. I asked questions constantly, not to challenge others, but to understand. Over time, that curiosity became second nature. I learned to think deeply and to see connections that others might overlook." Dr. Whitaker listened intently, realizing that this simple philosophy held profound power. He had spent years focusing on structure, credentials, and recognition, believing that knowledge was a hierarchy. Eleanor's approach was different. It was fluid, continuous, and deeply personal. Intelligence, she showed, was not about status or certificates but about a relentless desire to understand the world. As they spoke, Eleanor shared stories from her past. She spoke of her time in research, the long nights spent experimenting and analyzing data, and the exhilaration of discovering patterns that no one else had noticed. She recounted the challenges she faced as a woman in a male-dominated field, how she had to work twice as hard to earn respect, and how she often had to step back from opportunities to focus on family responsibilities. Despite the obstacles, she never lost her passion for learning. Her eyes shone with the memory of those days, and Dr. Whittaker felt a deep admiration for her resilience and dedication. What amazes me most, Eleanor continued, is that knowledge is limitless. No matter how much you learn, there is always more. That is why I never stop questioning, never stop exploring. Even now, I read papers, attend lectures online, and try to apply new ideas to problems I encounter in daily life. Learning is not a competition, it is a journey. Dr. Whittaker nodded, feeling a sense of awe and humility. He realized how often he had focused on winning debates, asserting authority, and proving his own intelligence. Eleanor's approach was entirely different, rooted in patience, openness, and genuine curiosity. He wondered how many students he had taught who might have benefited more from this method, and he resolved to change the way he approached teaching. As they continued their conversation, Eleanor revealed another aspect of her life that surprised Dr. Whittaker. Despite her achievements in science, she had always valued community and human connection. She volunteered at local schools, helping children with their studies, and organized small workshops to teach critical thinking and problem-solving. Her influence extended far beyond academia. She had quietly shaped the minds and lives of countless people in her community. You see, knowledge is most valuable when shared, she said, smiling. It is not enough to understand the world ourselves, we must help others understand it too. That is how progress truly happens. When we teach, we learn even more, and when we learn, we grow stronger together. Dr. Whittaker realized that Eleanor's brilliance was not just in her intellect, but in her wisdom. She had learned to combine knowledge with empathy, to inspire rather than intimidate, and to cultivate curiosity rather than fear. This was a form of genius he had rarely encountered, and he felt fortunate to witness it firsthand. Over the next few weeks, Dr. Whittaker and Eleanor continued to meet, discussing topics ranging from quantum physics to philosophy, and even exploring ways to make complex subjects more accessible to students. They brainstormed ideas for workshops, community programs, and public lectures that could inspire curiosity and critical thinking. Dr. Whittaker found himself learning as much from Eleanor as anyone he had ever taught or mentored. One day, while reviewing materials for an upcoming lecture, Dr. Whittaker realized something profound. Eleanor had changed his perspective not only on teaching but also on life itself. Her calm confidence, her humility, and her relentless curiosity had shown him that brilliance is not defined by age, status, or accolades. True intelligence is about the courage to explore, the humility to listen, and the willingness to grow continuously. Eleanor, sensing his reflection, smiled gently. Dr. Whittaker, do not be too hard on yourself, she said. We all make assumptions, especially when we rely on appearances or reputations. What matters is that we are willing to learn, to change, and to see beyond those assumptions. That is the path to true understanding. Her words struck him deeply. He realized how often he had judged people based on surface impressions, how many opportunities for learning he had missed because of bias or pride. Eleanor's life and example challenged him to be more open, more patient, and more observant. Her influence extended far beyond academic knowledge. It was a lesson in humanity, respect, and the value of lifelong learning. As the days turned into weeks, the collaboration between Eleanor and Dr. Whittaker grew stronger. They began hosting small discussion groups, inviting students, teachers, and community members to explore ideas together. Eleanor's presence transformed these gatherings. Her explanations were clear, her examples relatable, and her encouragement genuine. People who had once been intimidated by complex topics now found themselves engaged, asking questions, and discovering the joy of learning. Dr. Whittaker noticed something remarkable. Students who had struggled with confidence were now participating actively, inspired by Eleanor's approach. Teachers began incorporating her methods into their own classrooms, emphasizing curiosity and understanding over rote memorization. Even seasoned academics found themselves reconsidering how they communicated ideas, realizing that clarity, patience, and empathy were as important as knowledge itself. Eleanor never sought recognition or praise. She simply shared what she knew, guided others, and nurtured curiosity. Her brilliance was quiet yet transformative, subtle yet powerful. She showed that knowledge is not a tool for status or superiority, but a gift to be shared, a bridge to connect minds and hearts, and a spark to ignite potential in others. One afternoon, while walking through the community center after a workshop, Dr. Whitaker turned to Eleanor. "I think I understand now," he said softly. "Brilliance is not just about what you know. It's about how you share it, how you inspire others, and how you remain open to learning yourself. You have taught me more than I could have imagined, not just about science, but about life." Eleanor smiled, her eyes reflecting warmth and wisdom. "And you have reminded me, Dr. Whitaker, that learning is a journey best traveled together. We all have something to offer, something to teach, and something to learn. That is the beauty of life. It never stops giving, never stops challenging us, and never stops inspiring us." In that moment, Dr. Whitaker felt a profound sense of gratitude. Meeting Eleanor had been a turning point, a moment that reshaped his understanding of intelligence, teaching, and human connection. He realized that true wisdom is found not in accolades or authority, but in humility, curiosity, and the courage to share knowledge freely. As the sun set over the quiet streets of the town, Eleanor and Dr. Whitaker walked together, discussing ideas, sharing stories, and planning future projects. The world around them seemed brighter, filled with possibility and promise. Eleanor's influence extended beyond the lecture hall, beyond the classroom, reaching into the hearts and minds of everyone she encountered. For Dr. Whitaker, the experience was transformative. He had entered the lecture with a desire to assert his authority and demonstrate knowledge. He left with a deeper understanding of humility, empathy, and the true meaning of brilliance. Eleanor Thompson, the elderly woman he had once underestimated, had shown him that genius is not about recognition or appearances, but about curiosity, kindness, and the willingness to inspire others. And so, the story continued not with a single moment of triumph or embarrassment, but with an ongoing journey of learning, teaching, and mutual respect. Eleanor remained a guiding light, quietly shaping the world around her, while as the weeks passed, Eleanor Thompson's presence in the community continued to grow, though she remained humble and unassuming. People admired her not only for her intelligence but also for her kindness and willingness to help anyone who approached her with curiosity or a problem. Children loved visiting her home because of the way she made learning feel like an adventure rather than a chore. She would show them small experiments, fascinating facts, or even puzzles that encouraged them to think critically. For Eleanor, every question, no matter how simple, was important. One morning, as Eleanor prepared her notes for an upcoming workshop, she received a call from the principal of the local high school. He sounded excited and a little nervous. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "I hope I'm not disturbing you. We have a group of students struggling with science. They're intelligent but discouraged. Could you come and spend some time with them?" Eleanor smiled at the request. "Of course. I would be happy to help," she replied warmly. Later that week, she arrived at the school. The students were seated quietly, some looking skeptical. They had heard stories about Eleanor, but a few of them thought she might be strict or difficult. Eleanor, however, had a way of immediately making people feel comfortable. She greeted each student with a smile and asked about their interests, hobbies, and dreams. Slowly, the students began to relax. "I know science can feel challenging," Eleanor said, "but it is also full of wonder. Every discovery starts with a question. And every question is valuable. You don't have to know everything right away, you just need to be willing to explore." Then, she began a simple demonstration. She placed a glass of water on the table, added a few drops of oil, and sprinkled some pepper on top. "Watch carefully," she said, "and notice what happens." As the students watched, Eleanor touched the surface of the water with her finger. The pepper quickly scattered to the edges of the glass. She explained the science behind it in simple terms, using language that was easy to understand. The students were fascinated. One of them even laughed in surprise, realizing how a simple experiment could reveal such interesting principles. Eleanor encouraged each student to ask questions, no matter how small or silly they might seem. Some students asked about the experiment itself, while others wondered how these principles applied to everyday life. Eleanor answered patiently, giving examples they could relate to. Slowly, the atmosphere in the classroom changed. The students began to participate actively, their curiosity growing with each explanation. One boy, who had been quiet and reserved, raised his hand timidly. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "I've always thought I'm not good at science. But now, I think maybe I just didn't understand it the right way. Could I try another experiment?" Eleanor's eyes lit up. "Absolutely," she said. She handed him materials for a small project, guiding him gently as he worked. The boy's confidence grew with each step, and soon he was explaining the process to his classmates. Other students followed his example, trying experiments on their own and sharing their results. By the end of the session, the classroom was buzzing with energy, laughter, and excitement. Afterward, the principal thanked Eleanor warmly. "You have a remarkable gift," he said. "You've not only taught them science, but you've also inspired them to believe in themselves." Eleanor smiled humbly. "The gift is not mine alone," she said. "Every student has the potential to learn and grow. My job is just to help them see it." Meanwhile, Dr. Whittaker continued to work closely with Eleanor. They developed a series of workshops designed to reach wider audiences. They visited community centers, libraries, and schools, always focusing on engaging people in hands-on learning. Their collaboration became a model for effective teaching, blending knowledge, empathy, and curiosity. During one of their workshops, a young woman approached Eleanor with tears in her eyes. She introduced herself as Clara and explained that she had struggled with learning for years. "I've always felt like I couldn't understand things as quickly as others," Clara said. "But today, I realized that learning is not about speed, it's about persistence and curiosity. You've helped me believe that I can do this." Eleanor took Clara's hand gently. "Never compare yourself to others," she said softly. "Everyone has their own pace and their own way of understanding. The important thing is that you keep asking questions, exploring, and never giving up. You are capable of more than you realize." Clara smiled, feeling a sense of hope she had never known before. She left the workshop determined to continue learning, inspired by Eleanor's patience and encouragement. Eleanor watched her go, quietly proud of the difference she had made. Not long after, a local newspaper published an article about Eleanor and her work. The article highlighted her dedication to education, her ability to inspire students, and her humble approach to teaching. Despite the attention, Eleanor remained focused on her mission. She did not seek fame or recognition, she simply wanted to help others discover the joy of learning. Dr. Whittaker noticed a change in the community as well. People were more engaged, asking questions, and exploring new ideas. Teachers reported that students were more enthusiastic, and parents said their children were excited to share what they had learned. The workshops were not just about science, they were about curiosity, confidence, and a love for learning. One evening, after a particularly successful workshop, Eleanor and Dr. Whittaker sat together over tea. "I never imagined the impact we could have," Dr. Whittaker said. "Your approach is transforming not just students, but entire communities." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "Change takes time," she said. "But if even one person learns to see the world differently, to ask questions, and to keep exploring, that is enough. Knowledge grows when shared, and inspiration spreads when nurtured. Dr. Whittaker reflected on how much he had learned from Eleanor over the past months. He realized that teaching was not about demonstrating knowledge or asserting authority, it was about connecting with others, understanding their perspectives, and guiding them toward discovery. Eleanor had taught him that true education goes beyond facts and figures, it involves empathy, patience, and the courage to spark curiosity in others. As their workshops continued, Eleanor noticed a young boy who reminded her of herself at his age, curious, thoughtful, and eager to understand. His questions were persistent, and his imagination seemed boundless. She spent extra time with him, encouraging him to explore his ideas and showing him how to approach problems systematically. Over time, he developed confidence and a love for learning that inspired his classmates. Eleanor also began mentoring other teachers, sharing her methods and philosophy. She emphasized the importance of making learning accessible, engaging, and enjoyable. Teachers learned to listen more, to guide rather than dictate, and to create environments where questions were welcomed and mistakes were seen as opportunities to grow. Through all of this, Eleanor remained humble and grounded. She continued her own studies, reading books, attending lectures, and experimenting with new ideas. She never stopped learning, understanding that curiosity is a lifelong journey. Her example reminded everyone around her that learning is not confined to classrooms or textbooks, it is a way of living, a way of thinking, and a way of seeing the world. One day, a former student approached Eleanor with a notebook full of sketches, ideas, and observations. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "you taught me to see the world differently. I've been recording everything I notice, asking questions, and experimenting on my own. I want to become a scientist, and it's because of you." Eleanor's heart swelled with pride and gratitude. "I am so glad to hear that," she said. "Remember, the most important thing is to never stop asking questions and to always stay curious. That is what will guide you through any challenge." By the end of the year, Eleanor's influence had spread even further. Students, teachers, and community members alike had embraced her philosophy. The town had become a place where curiosity was celebrated, questions were encouraged, and learning was seen as a shared adventure. Eleanor's quiet dedication had created a ripple effect, touching countless lives and inspiring a culture of exploration and discovery. Dr. Whittaker, reflecting on the journey, realized how extraordinary Eleanor's impact had been. He had entered this partnership expecting to teach and guide, but he found himself learning lessons in patience, empathy, and true education. Eleanor had shown him that brilliance is not measured by accolades or authority, but by the ability to inspire others and nurture curiosity. As Eleanor walked home one evening, she thought about the journey so far. She smiled, knowing that the work was far from over. Every question asked, every experiment tried, every mind inspired was a step forward. Her mission was simple but profound: to share knowledge, spark curiosity, and help others see the endless possibilities that life offers. And so, Eleanor continued her work, quietly transforming the world around her, one curious mind at a time. Through her dedication, patience, and passion, she demonstrated that true brilliance lies not only in what we know but in how we use that knowledge to uplift, inspire, and empower others. As the seasons changed, Eleanor Thompson's work continued to grow, reaching more people than she ever imagined. Her workshops had become a beloved part of the community, drawing people of all ages, from children to seniors. News of her approach to teaching had spread far and wide, and now visitors from nearby towns would come just to meet her, hoping to learn how to inspire curiosity in others. Eleanor welcomed everyone with the same warmth and patience, treating each person as if they were a lifelong friend. One sunny afternoon, Eleanor received a letter that surprised her. It was an invitation to speak at a national education conference. The organizers had heard of her work and wanted her to share her methods and philosophy with teachers, administrators, and educators from across the country. Eleanor hesitated for a moment. She had never sought attention or recognition. Her life was simple, and she loved her quiet work. But after thinking it over, she realized this was an opportunity to help even more people. She accepted the invitation. When the day of the conference arrived, Eleanor walked onto the stage with her usual calm demeanor. She looked out at the audience, seeing hundreds of faces eager to learn. For a moment, she felt nervous, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. But she took a deep breath and began to speak, sharing her story, her experiences, and her philosophy. She talked about the importance of curiosity, patience, and empathy in teaching. She explained that learning was not just about memorizing facts but about encouraging exploration, asking questions, and thinking critically. Eleanor also shared examples from her workshops: the shy student who had found his confidence, the young girl who had discovered a love for science, and even the community that had begun to embrace curiosity and creativity in their daily lives. She explained how small acts of encouragement and understanding could transform lives and ignite a passion for learning that would last a lifetime. The audience listened intently. Many educators took notes, inspired by Eleanor's ideas. Some had been struggling to reach their students, feeling frustrated and unsure of how to make learning meaningful. Eleanor's words gave them hope and a new perspective. By the end of her speech, the room was filled with applause. Eleanor smiled, not out of pride, but because she knew that her message had touched people's hearts and minds. After the conference, Eleanor was approached by dozens of teachers and administrators who wanted to implement her methods in their schools. She spent hours talking with them, sharing tips and strategies for engaging students, and emphasizing the importance of patience, understanding, and creativity. She encouraged them to see each student as an individual, to listen carefully, and to guide rather than dictate. Her approach was simple but powerful, and it resonated deeply with everyone she met. Back in her town, Eleanor continued her local workshops, now with a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that even small changes could have a big impact. She worked closely with students, teachers, and parents, helping them see that learning could be joyful, interactive, and meaningful. The children in particular loved her approach, and many began to dream bigger than they ever had before. They asked more questions, experimented more boldly, and shared their discoveries with friends and family. One day, Dr. Whitaker came to visit Eleanor with exciting news. A group of young students, inspired by her workshops, had entered a national science competition. They had designed a project based on what they had learned from Eleanor, combining creativity with scientific principles. The project had won first place, earning recognition for their innovation and teamwork. Eleanor was thrilled. She knew that the students' success was not just a reflection of their intelligence but of the confidence and curiosity she had helped nurture. "This is exactly why I do what I do," she said, smiling. "When students believe in themselves, they can accomplish amazing things." Over the next several months, Eleanor noticed a remarkable change in the town. People were more curious, more engaged, and more willing to explore new ideas. Parents encouraged their children to ask questions, teachers adopted more interactive methods, and even local businesses began to support educational initiatives. Eleanor's influence had created a ripple effect, transforming the entire community into a place where learning and curiosity were celebrated. One afternoon, as Eleanor was helping a group of children build a model volcano, she noticed an elderly man watching quietly from the doorway. He seemed hesitant at first, but then he walked over and introduced himself as Mr. Harris, a retired scientist. He had heard about Eleanor's workshops and wanted to see her in action. "I've been teaching science for over 40 years, he said, "and I've never seen anyone engage students the way you do. Your approach is remarkable." Eleanor thanked him, but she felt a little nervous. Compliments had never been her motivation. She preferred to let her work speak for itself. Mr. Harris continued, sharing ideas and discussing ways they could collaborate to reach even more students. Eleanor realized that even experienced professionals could learn from each other, and she welcomed the opportunity to share and grow alongside him. Soon, Eleanor and Mr. Harris began hosting joint workshops, combining their expertise to create even more engaging and inspiring experiences for students. They introduced hands-on experiments, interactive discussions, and real-world problem-solving activities. Students were not only learning scientific principles but also developing critical thinking skills, creativity, and teamwork. The workshops became highly popular, drawing participants from neighboring towns and communities. During one workshop, a young girl named Lily approached Eleanor nervously. She had always struggled with math and science and had often felt discouraged. "Mrs. Thompson," she said softly, "I'm afraid I'll never be good at this." Eleanor knelt down to Lily's level and smiled warmly. "Everyone has their own strengths, Lily," she said gently. "Learning is not about being perfect, it's about trying, asking questions, and discovering new things. Let's work together, and I promise you'll see how capable you really are." Over the next few weeks, Eleanor spent extra time with Lily, patiently guiding her through concepts and encouraging her to experiment and explore. Slowly but surely, Lily began to gain confidence. She asked questions, shared her ideas, and even started helping her classmates understand difficult topics. By the end of the program, Lily had developed a love for learning and a newfound sense of self-belief. Eleanor's heart swelled with pride and joy. Moments like these were the true reward of her work, not recognition, awards, or praise, but the transformation she witnessed in the lives of her students. She knew that by nurturing curiosity, confidence, and perseverance, she was helping to shape the next generation of thinkers, innovators, and leaders. As Eleanor reflected on her journey, she realized how far she had come from the quiet, unassuming life she once led. Her work had grown beyond her expectations, touching countless lives and inspiring a culture of curiosity and exploration. Yet, despite all the attention and accolades, she remained humble, grounded, and focused on her mission, to help others discover the joy of learning and the power of their own potential. One evening, as Eleanor sat by her window watching the sunset, Dr. Whitaker joined her with a cup of tea. "You've changed so many lives," he said softly. "I don't think anyone truly understands the impact you've had." Eleanor shook her head gently. "It's not about me," she replied. "It's about the students, the teachers, and everyone willing to learn and grow. Knowledge is a gift, and the greatest joy is seeing it flourish in others." Dr. Whitaker smiled, understanding her words. He knew that Eleanor's brilliance was not measured by degrees, titles, or awards but by the lives she had touched and the curiosity she had ignited. As the years passed, Eleanor continued her work with the same passion, patience, and dedication. Her methods became widely recognized, her workshops expanded, and her philosophy of learning inspired educators across the nation. Yet, she never lost sight of what truly mattered: the spark of curiosity in a child's eyes, the excitement of discovery, and the confidence of someone realizing their own potential. One day, a former student, now grown and pursuing a career in science, returned to Eleanor's workshop. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "you changed the way I see the world. You showed me that learning can be exciting, that questions are powerful, and that persistence pays off. I want to thank you for everything." Eleanor smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "I am so proud of you," she said. "Remember, learning never stops. Keep asking questions, exploring, and sharing your knowledge with others. That is how the world grows better." As the student left, Eleanor looked around at her classroom filled with eager minds, hands raised, questions flowing, and smiles lighting up every face. She knew that this was her legacy, not a single achievement, but a community of curious, confident, and inspired learners, ready to explore the world with open hearts and minds. And so, Eleanor Thompson continued her quiet, extraordinary work, touching lives in ways that would be remembered for generations. She had shown that true genius is not measured by degrees or accolades but by the ability to inspire, uplift, and awaken curiosity in the hearts of others. In every child's smile, in every question asked, and in every mind ignited by wonder, Eleanor's spirit lived on proof that knowledge shared with kindness and patience has the power to change the world.